Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Rural Capital Fund webinar to learn a bit more about the one-off fund that we have launched here at North Yorkshire Sport. My name is George Cull, and I'll just quickly hand over to Neil Russell to introduce himself and just say a little bit about himself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Neil Russell. I'm one of the active communities managers at North Yorkshire Sport, and I'll be playing one of the leading roles in the Rural Capital Fund.
Brilliant, thank you, Neil. And we're just going to take you through and pick out some of the main points that really we want to emphasise through this fund, talk you through them, hopefully answer any questions that you've got, and perhaps help formulate some of the thinking that you may have. So just first of all, before we kind of get into the meaty bit of the fund, just to provide you with a little bit of context to who North Yorkshire Sport are, and hopefully some or most of you will have heard a little bit about us at least, and at least you will have visited our website to register for tonight and to find out some more information. But we're a charity covering York and North Yorkshire, albeit for the purposes of tonight. This fund is the local authority area of North Yorkshire that we're talking about. But our main drive, our main reason for existence is to reduce inequalities through movement, physical activity and sport. And that's really kind of important for us to point out that although we've got sport in our name, it is about that breadth of movement and physical activity as well. As well as being a leading charity in the county, we're also part of a national infrastructure of active partnerships working alongside Sport England. So there's an equivalent one of us across each region within England. And if you want to find out more about the work that we do, that link there takes you to our annual impact report. There's a lovely video that you can see there about some of the differences that we make and the change that we help create in communities. In terms of some of the background as to why this fund is in place, those of you who will know, the government had strong commitment around the levelling up agenda, and we will not delve too much into political thoughts or anything like that in this webinar. But one of the main commitments around that was to provide funding to each of the regions within the country for them to look at how they best go about levelling up. And this then resulted in a series of two main funds. So the UKSPF, which we'll refer to using those initials, abbreviations, and the REPF. So Shared Prosperity in North Yorkshire, the main purpose of it is to enable the people, communities and businesses across the rural, coastal and urban areas to harness the opportunities to thrive and prosper. In North Yorkshire, 16.9 million has been allocated to spend on programmes and projects through the UKSPF strand, and then 5.4 million from the Rural England Prosperity Fund. So this that we're talking about today has come through that Rural England Prosperity Fund, hence why it's called the Rural Capital Fund. This has then come out of the strand which looks at communities and place, so very much rooted around how this investment is supporting communities and places across the county. North Yorkshire Sport are delivering this on behalf of North Yorkshire Council, so they are working with us for us to provide both support and also to manage that process of how these funds are administered and invested. We very much see that as we're not just giving out grants and we're not just running a grant scheme. It's about actually how we nurturing, supporting, developing, hand-holding organisations through this process as well. So that's a little bit of the background. I'm now going to hand over Neil to talk you through much more of the nuts and bolts of how the fund works.
Thanks, George. So yeah, we have the Rural Capital Fund. So as George has identified, it's an opportunity to improve, increase the places and spaces where people can be active across North Yorkshire. Obviously, it's about extending reach to others within your community. It's not just about a club putting an application in for something just for their members. We want to see how facilities can reach out, clubs and facilities can reach out into the community. We are talking just about capital developments. There isn't a revenue strand to the Rural Capital Fund, and in terms of exclusions, it's not available for those within the towns of Scarborough, Knaresborough, or Harrogate. Sorry. In terms of the criteria, the maximum amount is 49,999. One of the changes that George has communicated through the email that went out yesterday, match funding. Sorry, the projects can be up to a maximum of 250,000 now. Previously, it was a maximum of 49,999 against a total project cost of around 100,000. We are looking for match funding between 20 and 80% of the project cost. So the example there is if you have a £250,000 project, then you can get roughly 20% of the project costs towards that. In terms of match funding, we appreciate there is lots of challenges around matching money, but obviously we want to see that organisations have had a pretty strong attempt at attracting match for the project. Planning permission and obtaining quotes for the work. Planning permission typically 8 to 13 weeks. So it's pretty important that if you are looking at a capital project that is going to take a significant amount of time, that you factor in that planning permission period. We also are looking for a number of quotes, 2 quotes, I think. Is it George? Is that right? Yeah. 2 quotes for. We obviously want that comparison, and a really important thing is that the works have to be delivered. The project has to be delivered by March 2025. In terms of advice and guidance, there's a team. There's 4 active communities managers available to provide advice and guidance. I mean, I think it's a really important point, and George mentioned this isn't just a grant administration scheme. We really want to provide the support and be on the end of the phone and be able to answer questions, because we appreciate that a lot of organisations, when they take on capital projects, it might not be something that they have a lot of experience or the internal expertise particularly. Applications need to demonstrate that there is a need, and we've used the term community engagement as part of the process. It is essential. Community engagement, this isn't just about consulting the membership. This is about looking at the wider community and identifying, is this project wanted and needed? We want you to tell us the story about how the project will make a difference. So typically an application might say, we want £50,000, and these are the things that we actually want. What we want to really understand is, what will a project achieve in terms of impact? What will that investment mean to the lives of individuals within your community? It's that story, it's that compelling narrative that we're really keen to understand. And then we can work back and understand how what you are applying for will deliver that. There are a number of exclusions which are in the guidance, which means that an application won't be considered. And so we would say, please check the criteria before you submit an application. What we obviously don't want you to do is waste your time. And obviously, when you are looking at the development of a capital asset, it will put significant strain on the capacity and potentially the capability within an organisation. So, please consider: are you able to deliver this project with the capability and capacity you have within the organisation, or will you need to bring in additional capacity? Again, what I'd say is, if you're not sure, have that conversation with us, and we'll see how we can help and help you through that. So the fund is open for applications now. As we've said on previous slides, if you have an idea, rather than spending a lot of time, if you come and have a conversation with us, and we can offer what advice and guidance we can. The deadline is 7th of January 2024 for the form to be completed in full. But again, just to reiterate, have conversations with us throughout this process so that we can provide that support, or we can signpost to organisations that can provide that support. There will be an internal panel following the closing date of the 7th of January, and decisions will be made in late January to early February. So we are here to help and support, and we are here to provide the input that you might need throughout.
Brilliant, and thank you for that, Neil. And the bits I was going to sort of finish off on are just some of the early signposting to other things which may be on your radar, or may not be, or maybe other things to explore as well. But I think the other thing, just to sort of add on that, is that there's a real tightrope to walk with this fund around knowing that things have got to be done and delivered by the end of March 2025. Which feels a long way away, but in reality, it's not. And so we've got to get the balance right of giving a long enough period for this application process to happen, but then also to turn around and award those funds, and then give enough time for spades in the ground, etc., and delivery of that project to happen. So it's a tight time scale, even though we're talking potentially 18 months away, near enough. But needs must in terms of that. And then just to finish off, just to signpost to two or three other sort of things. I'm going to put these links in the chat shortly. We are in the middle of a series of webinars that are being delivered with our colleagues in the rest of Yorkshire, looking at around finances for organisations, particularly sort of voluntary organisations. So session 1 has already happened around dealing with increased costs, but session 2 is coming up very soon, and session 3 and 4 later on this year and into next year. But they deal with different themes, are typically aimed at sort of volunteers and people involved in sort of sports clubs or small voluntary organisations. So they might be worth looking at around ideas that might help you with either efficiency of existing operations, or how you might look at things like planning for the future. And those workshops are all online as well. Crowdfunding is another seems, I wouldn't say craze necessarily, but is a more popular way of raising funds and pulling on that generosity of people in your community. And actually, when we talk about that evidence of need, that people in your local community might want this development, then actually bringing in some match funding potentially through a process like this is actually really good evidence. If you've got people in your locality offering out things that then there's a cash value against, and people donating against it. There's also a program running at the moment with Sport England called Active Together, where they will, when you get to certain amounts, will top up the amount of funding that you get. So it's very useful for sort of raising some of that match funding, and there are definite examples of clubs in North Yorkshire that have used that. And then the other one to point you towards is obviously the Rural Fund is through the Rural England Prosperity Fund, but also through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. There is also a small grants, sport, physical activity and active travel fund, which we, North Yorkshire Sport, are also managing. That's going under the name of Places, Spaces, People. That is 3k to 20k, so smaller amounts. Similar time scale in terms of how it runs, but can be revenue as well as smaller scale capital. So clearly it's not going to be on the scale of what some of these programs might be, but some of you may actually consider that this is a more achievable thing for where you are, or may complement some of what you're doing. So this again is all North Yorkshire wide, so the exclusions of Harrogate Knaresborough and Scarborough don't apply on this fund. And there is a webinar very similar to this being run on the 9th of November. So if you go to that website, which I'll put in the chat in a second, that will they will run a similar webinar and bring that to life for you there. The other thing that I will point out is around the two application processes. So the Rural Capital Fund, which we're talking about here tonight, is one application where you submit it all in one go. So it's worth having a look at that application form and get copying your answers into a Word document or something like that and being ready to copy them over in one go. Because it's not a document that you can save or an application form that you can save and come back to. And we need all of the answers submitted in one go. The Places, Spaces, People Fund is a bit more, you can submit more of an idea without having it fully formed and then come back to some of the questions to answer them at a later date. So they do operate in slightly different ways. So it's just worth pointing that out for you there. And that kind of concludes certainly what we felt we needed to bring to life for people on the call tonight. I'm going to stop sharing the screen in a second, post in the chat those links, and then there's a couple of questions certainly in the chat that we can just have a look through and see if we can get an answer for tonight.